It's good to have you here. I want to start with the scripture passage we used last time, but from a different version of the Bible, the Message, which I really like. If any of you ever read the Message, or it's kind of a go-to thing for me when I'm just not smart enough to understand what the other ones are saying. So I go to it, and he helps me. It starts like this. How can I stand up before God and show proper respect to the high God? Should I bring an armload of offerings, topped off with yearling calves? Would God be impressed with thousands of rams, with buckets and barrels of olive oil? But he's already made it plain how to live and what to do. What God is looking for in men and women is quite simple. To do what is fair and just to your neighbor. Be compassionate and loyal in your love. And don't take yourself too seriously. Take God seriously. Isn't that beautiful? How many of you take yourself too seriously? Anybody? Come on. Don't lie. Don't lie. You're in a church. Anita does. And then she asked me to take her seriously. And then that gets all kind of crazy. Today, I just want to, as last week, I just want to make a few observations, tell a couple stories, and hopefully it'll stir something in you that will want you to go on a deeper search for what justice is and what it isn't. Would you agree with this statement that the established order doesn't champion meaningful change very much? I mean, if you look at it, change seems to come from the margins and works itself in. The status quo, well, people who like the status quo don't really want to be too disturbed. That's my experience. Probably doesn't happen in a Presbyterian church, but the church I served in Chicago, the status quo didn't like to be pushed into uncomfortable kind of corners. And what we've discovered on justice journeys is that the marginalized are the ones that are really beating the drum and really doing the hard work. And they're asking us to join them in this beautiful journey to trying to have a more just world. But I got to tell you, it's not easy. To live in a just world, well, it requires a lot of justice, and being just demands something of us. It's not so much a destination as it is a rigorous journey filled with ups and downs. And in the ups and the downs, you can feel great joy and great sorrow. And it is, if nothing else, it's a long obedience in the same direction. It's a journey where misunderstanding happens and reconciliation can take a long time. Justice, the search for it and living it out, is almost all taxing. Almost always. It's not an easy thing to do. Would you agree with that? That long obedience in the same direction. So I'm going to talk to you about something that happened to me in a workplace I was in. This is, it's called Breakthrough. I'm representing today. It's on the west side of Chicago. And Breakthrough really believes that justice happened in people's lives through a series of breakthroughs. It wasn't just something. It was a series of things that helped make people whole and alive. One of the things we did is we realized that a lot of the men that were in our homeless shelter had never been fathered. Our clientele was pretty poor. Some of them were chronically homeless, others not so much, primarily black men, a handful of Hispanic guys, a few white guys, but they were just people that just there was something missing from their life. And I remember one day so we did this thing every year called the Male Initiative, every week. And basically what we were doing is trying to fill in the gaps that they didn't get from male figures in their life. Pretty cool, huh? So I was teaching at one time, and you know, with me were two African-American colleagues. We kind of rotated this. And I I was kind of waxing eloquently. I really thought so. I mean, I thought, dude, you are on a roll today. You know, I wanted to take notes on myself. Seriously, I mean, this is the best thing. And so I was feeling good about myself, but there's this new guy in class. And all he did was kind of glower at people the whole time, everybody. And so I'm talking, and I'm going along, going, this is great. It wasn't ego at all, but oh yes, it was a lot of ego. And he looks at me, and he really loudly, he says, what the, and then he used a word that I can't use here in church, because I know somebody would report me. So I'll just say, what the heck? But it wasn't that. I mean, he did it dramatically too. Have you ever had somebody use a really bad swear word and do it with great emotion? You know, well, that was Jerry. And he said, what the heck do you know about being black, poor, and homeless? And then he glared at me. I mean, I couldn't get away from his eyes. I mean, I really did. But it was very uncomfortable. And I mumbled and I stumbled trying to answer. And he says, you know nothing. You know nothing. Well, somehow, that kind of put a little awkward twist in what we were doing that morning. Got through it. And, well, how do you think I felt hearing that? I mean, if you said, somebody said that to you, was there a word, phrase? You can just shout it out. Huh? Defeated. That's a great word. Yeah. Defensive. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, humiliated. It was all those things. I just felt so down about that. Because I really didn't want to fail these guys. But nobody had ever come at me quite like that before. I was hurt, embarrassed. I was angry too. How dare you? How dare you? So afterwards, my colleagues and I talked about it, and they knocked me off the cliff. And that was helpful. But I couldn't get what he said out of my mind. It was as if God was using him to try to teach me something. You see, I wanted to say to Jerry that I was there because I wanted to be, that I had downsized myself from this church that paid me quite well, and a good sizable chunk of my income just went out the door, that I did know something about being poor because I grew up poor. I didn't know much about being black. And I was only beginning to learn what happens when someone becomes homeless. But I didn't say any of those things because it would be defensive and really self-serving. For once, I did the right thing. Jerry laid down a challenge. What do you know? And I found myself looking for an answer. And I wasn't going to find it just deep inside me. I had to know more about Jerry. Jerry's journey was chaotic. He grew up in Mississippi. He watched friends and relatives being attacked by Klan members. Found out that he witnessed a lynching or two. He grew up, he never had a white boss that he got along with. When he looked for social services, he often didn't find what he needed. He knew white people who wanted to help, but they never stayed around long enough to actually be of help. And I do believe he was tired of white people. And after I talked to a few people about him who were woke, but we didn't use that term back then. He says because woke wasn't going to answer his questions. And he found people that thought they were woke, and I was probably one of them, right? Look what I was doing. You know, he found people to be a bit insufferable. Jerry had a story, and white people played a very unhealthy role in the midst of that story. And you can understand that, right? So Jerry was in our class for several months. And on the day he was released, he said, to go, the program was you could stay at our shelter for up to 6 months, and then we would help you find permanent housing, or more permanent housing. So it was a good program. He was going to go to a more permanent spot, which was really good news. And then I'll never forget the day, so here we are. I'm there, Jerry's right next to me, and he said, about halfway through, he just looked at me and he said, "You ain't as stupid as I thought you were." Then he hit me in the arm. He said, "You're not as stupid as I thought you were," which was a great encouragement. Yeah, Anita says that to me all the time. Here's what I learned. Even though I was on a justice journey, I had a long way to go. There were a lot of things I didn't know. A lot of things I didn't understand. And if I wanted to stay on a justice journey, I had to be prepared for a bumpy road. And it was going to be bumpy for a long time. Because doing justice, as the psalmist, or as Micah asks us to do, right, through the Lord, is a bumpy journey. You have to earn the right to be heard. And earning that right isn't easy. Have any of you had that experience? That the justice journey is bumpy? How do you know that? You're my neighbor. I'm going to ask you to speak. Go ahead.
Hello. Okay. We were part of a church that sold our building to Light of the World Church. So we got to interact with them. And in doing that, we ran into situations they were experiencing that made, like you said, we had no real connection with understanding because they were Black and they were in part of town that wasn't the greatest, and they were professional people. But the way they were treated sometimes was not.
Yes.
Because of the color of their skin. And they also had a great ministry in that area.
Yes, they did.
And still do, I believe.
Yes, they do.
The thing that I felt totally ignorant on was how did all of that work for them? Because I had never been in that situation. So I didn't personally run into a lot of difficulty with it, but I found when I was with them, they had a freedom I didn't have, and they understood life in a different way than I did.
Yeah.
And I wished I'd have understood more, and still wish I understood more.
Right.
So that was kind of my experience.
Yeah.
Lee might have had more. He worked with them more closely.
And that's part of the journey of discovery. We're on a justice journey when we begin to discover what we don't know. And that can be very freeing, because sometimes we feel like we have to know everything. When I began to realize that there were things that I just didn't know, and no matter how much reading I did, that I will never get to experience exactly. But I had people like Jerry who could be my teachers. Wish he could have been kinder about it, but he taught me something, because I've never forgot that moment. Yeah, Lee.
At a church in Ohio where I was pastoring, it came to a very abrupt end. It was a very difficult time, and there were lots of things that people said that were not true. Rumors of why we were leaving, although, we had said why we were leaving, but a lot of speculation that we weren't telling the whole truth. And out of that, you feel like you got to suppress all that and confront each and every person, each and every situation. But through that, and we did some confrontation, and people would come to us, and those who came to us, obviously, we had the opportunity. But the injustice sometimes is you just have to simply let it go
Yeah.
and not try to, try to take care of every situation in that setting. But the good news is that even years later, a couple from that church moved to Sarasota who had given us a lot of strife, not just when we left, but even before, came to us down here and said, we want to be reconciled. We want we forgive you.
Yeah,
That's justice served.
that's a great part of the journey, yes. I would tell you another story. And is everything okay? Okay. Why don't you just turn that mic off for a second? Yeah, there we go. Because we're getting some feedback here. Yeah. How many of you remember Ted Koppel and Nightline? Right? So I was in my home in Evanston. Nightline came on about, I think, 11 o'clock at night. And I was just kind of fiddling around. And all of a sudden, I saw on the screen on Nightline a picture of the neighborhood that I lived in. And then the street where my kids went to school. And then a picture of a guy I was on an anti-violence task force with. I thought, well, maybe I should watch this. And so I did. A man and his wife, this man and his wife had lost their son in a drive-by shooting. It was in the northernmost suburb of Chicago. Young Hispanic man, a gangbanger, he and his friend decided they would shoot into a fruit stand and killed their son just like that. And this was the story of how they reacted. Now, the shooter was convicted in pretty short order and deserved to be. He admitted that he did to it, and then sent to an Illinois prison downstate to serve a long sentence. Justice? What do you think? It's a form of justice. Something happened, we got somebody that was a little crazy, immature, all those kind of things off the streets. So in some ways, the justice really was achieved. The father was a mess. I knew it by sitting on the board with him. He was angry, he was frustrated, he was filled with grief. He clenched his fist and he kind of pounded tables. And he found himself in a prison of his own grief. The justice system, he admitted, had worked well. But he said, I just can't be well. The killer was convicted of his crime and then sent to do his time, but he felt like he was not free at all. He was trying to work it out by doing anti-violence work, anti-gang work, anti-gun work, but he was stuck. Now, Nightline didn't focus too much on him. They focused on the wife. His wife was also beside herself with grief. She had a friend who worked in a prison ministry, a Mennonite friend, actually, Reba Place Church, who worked in a prison ministry, and she said, I have met your son's killer, and I just want you to know he too is beside himself. He's so filled with grief for what it is that he did. And she looked at her and said, would you be willing to meet with him? To go downstate with me, to talk with him? And perhaps even go to jail together and to pray together. And she pursed her lips and she said, no way. He can rot. He killed my son. And the story goes on that she began to soften, that maybe God was trying to tell her something. You know, whenever you hear something, but then God, you know, something really nice is going to happen. But then God worked on her life, and she began to soften. And she finally agreed to meet her son's killer. And she walked into that prison with clenched fists. And over time, after many, many meetings together, she opened her hands to him, reconciling, recognizing him as a child of God. And she released him from the prison of her anger and desolation. And in the process, she was set free. And in that process, he, in some ways, was set free too. That's a different kind of justice, isn't it? Committed the crime, he's going to do the time. But there's always something else that usually has to be done in the midst of that. Any thoughts, reactions to that story? She nodded her head. Yeah, it's poignant, isn't it? Justice is defined as an ethical, philosophical idea that people are to be treated impartially and fairly and properly and reasonably by the law and by arbitrators of the law. That laws are to ensure that no harm befalls another, and that when harm is alleged, a remedial action is taken, both with the accuser and the accused. And the accused often receive a morally right consequence of it, a morally right consequence merited by their actions. But that's not enough, is it? When we talk about justice has got to be done, it's just not enough, because there's a biblical view of justice that is far more expansive than all of that. And I think the woman that persuaded the woman to go to the prison with her to meet the killer of her son understood what that was. You see, a biblical view of justice is not a set of bullet points or a set of rules and guidelines. It is rooted in the very character of God. And it is in the outworking of that character, which is never less than just, that the really good things begin to happen. Biblical justice is characterized by radical generosity, a commitment to equality, life-changing advocacy. It is for people being restored, and it's less about clamping down on people. I would maintain in our culture right now, we're more interested in clamping down on people and not seeing them restored.